Go.
All right.
Hello.
Hello.
And we're on. This is the
We
first
are on.
maiden voyage of Roko's Basilisk,
Roko's Basilisk.
which is a very interesting title.
Yeah, we have to get to that.
I think we should start there.
Should we start there? Did you want to introduce us, or maybe that's not? I don't
think
know.
that's.
Do you do that?
Oh yeah, we should. We should totally introduce ourselves.
Yeah.
So, my name is Graham Moorhead. I am an AI researcher and a computational linguist, and I used to be a physicist. And I'm interested in almost everything.
Yeah.
And yourself, Babak.
Well, I'm Babak Rasulzadeh. I also am a former AI researcher with academic background, turned entrepreneur and startup founder, and basically someone who tries to make money off of AI, but also to do some good in the world, I would say.
Yeah, I'd say you have a strong streak of wanting to do good in the world. Maybe stronger than your desire to make money, in my opinion.
I'm very happy to hear that from you. I'm glad that someone other than me says that. Thank you. And we've known each other for quite some time now.
Since the beginning of 2017.
Yeah.
So you hired me at Monitor 360 when it was still called that, and I moved there like during Christmas break of 2016. And that was a crazy time because right during Christmas my back went out.
I remember that.
It went out in a way that it had never gone out
Severe
before.
back problems.
Yeah. And I had to go home after break on airplane flights and then pack up and move.
Jesus, wow.
During that.
Yeah, there was a turbulent period in my life, to say the least.
Oh yeah, and it was even more complicated because I had to move to two places at once.
I remember that too.
I moved to Virginia, another part of Virginia, to a cheaper apartment so I could have an apartment near my daughter and another one near our work, which, it was just, a 10-minute walk from the office, which was awesome. I loved living there.
I remember that. That was a pretty awesome apartment. We hung out there once, at least once, I think.
Yeah, the view is great.
Yeah.
But what's great about now I live in a small town America. I live in Spokane, Washington. And guess what? Here, I can afford to have my own place without roommates. Whereas in San Francisco, that was damn near impossible.
I can't afford it, even though I'm pretty sure I'm probably earning amongst the top 1% or 2% of America, and I still can't afford to live by myself in San Francisco.
San Francisco is crazy, and it's just going to get worse.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's been getting worse for every year I've lived here, and I've lived here for 7 years now, since I moved here from Sweden, basically.
Yeah.
Because obviously, even though the listeners or the viewers won't believe it, I'm Swedish.
Yes. Say something in Swedish.
Ja, jag kan ju räkna till 10 på svenska. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Swedish is beautiful. That's a beautiful language.
Yeah.
I can't say that I plan to learn it though.
No, it's spoken by about 9, maybe 10 million people.
Yeah,
so,
and what percentage of them speak English?
99%. So yeah.
Yep.
It's I hope not, but we all know, especially you and I, who know a thing or two about linguistics and the history of languages, that it's the kind of language that it's likely that it won't be around, say, 500 years or 1,000 years from now.
Oh, I beg to differ.
Oh, really?
Here's why.
Interesting.
Think about accents in America.
Mm-hmm.
I had this feeling that once TV really started to get into the culture, and it did, and I mean, I grew up in the 80s and TV was awesome, it was huge. MTV started, and it just felt like all of America was coalescing on this one sort of orbit we called American culture, right?
Right.
And people thought accents would start to disappear. but they got stronger, measurably stronger. I mean, in my life, I've kind of grown up around several accents. My parents are from Kentucky, and I spent a lot of summers down there. My parents still talked like this throughout my childhood, but they don't now. Then, half my childhood I spent in England. I spent some of it in Suffolk County and some in London. But when I came back to America, actually Boston, all my friends made fun of me. Like, kid, why do you talk like that? You talk so funny. So I had to start talking like them. But then my mom said, no, you're not a runner. You're a runner. You're not a swimmer. You're a swimmer. Because my mother was an English teacher from Kentucky. So she wasn't going to allow me to have
No, she wasn't going to allow that kind of foul English.
Yeah, but I still love it to this day. Yeah, I'm from Bedford, Mass, kid. Where are you from? Part of me loves it.
I sometimes wonder how much you can hear on me that I'm Swedish. I'm pretty sure most people can tell that I'm not American. There's something weird about my accent, I'm sure about that. But that's
very little.
Oh, really?
I think when I think about your accent compared to Stellan Skarsgård, for instance, you sound more American than he does.
Yeah, that's true. Even I can very much tell he has a thick Swedish accent.
Yeah. Something, though, when actors get to a certain point, maybe they want to keep their accent.
Yes, it does become a part of their identity, their character. They are.
You know who's the biggest example? You know who's the biggest example of this?
I'm trying to think.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh, yes, of course. Oh, wait, so you're arguing that he might even have lost it in regular life. It's just that he still keeps up the act.
He kept it on purpose. He had to get a accent coach. At some point during the late 80s, he got an accent coach to make sure he kept his Austrian accent.
That's mind-blowing.
He was starting to lose it.
It makes total sense.
He was married to a Kennedy. He was U.S. royalty, basically. That makes him royalty, you know. And he was just so embedded in American culture, he was starting to lose it.
Huh.
At least that's the urban legend that I've heard, and maybe it's true.
I love it. I love urban legends.
I hope it's true.
I love urban legends. But we're here to talk about a bunch of other things, I guess. At Roko's Basilisk. Maybe we should start there.
We should.
I think, I just got the example from one of my friends who I actually consider extremely well-read and educated and intelligent, that he didn't know what Roko's Basilisk was. And the truth of the matter is that most people don't, right? It's a very
that was planned.
Yes. And
the people who thought it up wanted that.
And in fact, everyone who knows what it is hesitates and thinks twice, 3 times, maybe even more about telling others. And they even warn them before telling them, saying that you might not want to know this. I might be
endangering you.
Yeah, endangering you by telling you. So you sure. So maybe we should start off with that, like a warning to our listeners, like do they actually want to know, and with some sort of disclaimer that if you continue listening from this point on, at least for the next maybe 10 minutes, you're doing so at your own peril.
Yeah, but they got to understand what kind of peril it is.
Eternal damnation.
So some people. Well, not eternal, no, probably not. But destruction, damnation, death, something like that. If a future AI comes into being and decides to destroy you.
Right. So
we'll stop it there or kill you.
Let's start by explaining what it is.
Now you can stop if you don't want to watch and don't want to get killed by a future AI. Now we're moving on. Everyone listening now is brave enough to listen to this horrible little thought experiment that should give you nightmares, if anything ever has.
All right.
You want to give your version, and then I'll
I'll give my
fill
version
in what
from
I've thought.
how I remember it. So the idea is this: that if humanity and our civilization, or any civilization for that matter, continues on to the point that we actually invent, create, or our great-grandchildren create a superhuman AI, one that is so all-knowing and omnipotent, all-powerful, that it will be able to do basically anything. If that happens, and we can't rule that out. If that happens, this all-knowing AI will be, or all-powerful AI, will be so powerful that it can basically resurrect copies of the consciousnesses that have lived in the past, because it's all just patterns of information, and we'll be able to, because of historic records and everything that we store about ourselves, and knowingly and unknowingly, we'll be able to know who was working towards its creation, birth, and who was working against it. And the theory then is, or the thought experiment is, that it's likely that it would want to punish everyone who was working either against it or not working towards its birth, its creation.
Yeah.
And that punishment can be as awful as you can imagine, and even worse. Basically, it could decide to recreate you in a simulation, and we'll get to this when we'll talk about our next topic, but it could run you in a simulation for as long as it wants, maybe not an eternity, but a very long time, and it could torture your consciousness within that simulation for as long and horrendous, painful as it would want. And that this notion of it being able to do that is itself a thought that it is aware, even in its non-existence, pre-birth, would speed up its existence. Basically, by knowing this, we will all be now, if this is inevitable, maybe I should join forces in creating this than working against it. It's like, to draw a Nazi parallel, it's like knowing that Hitler will win, and it's inevitable, and knowing that he will punish anyone who didn't join the Nazis. You might actually, well, in that case, you might actually decide to just kill yourself. But that's not going to help. That's not going to help with Roko's Basilisk.
It's not going to help.
That's the horrific thing about that thought experiment. Anyways, that's my version of it.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and that's worse than I had remembered. I had forgot about him being the AI God thing, being able to resurrect you and make you suffer for eternity. I had forgotten about that part. Yes, that is truly horrible. And by naming it this, we are putting ourselves in danger, and I gladly do so because I have some things that I believe and I'm trying hard to make us ready for.
Yeah.
I believe that people who are cooperative and empathetic need to be the ones to develop the first true AI. It has to be us. Imagine another case. Imagine if the first true AI is developed, for instance, by Russian criminals who want to use it to break into bank accounts.
Right.
Are they going to treat it with respect? No. They're going to use it like a slave.
Yeah.
Like a tool. Same thing if like the Chinese intelligence service is the first ones to make it. Same thing if Wall Street traders. In fact, there was this scary prediction that the first true AI is going to be where all the money goes for fast autonomous decision making. Wall Street
Makes
trading,
a lot of sense.
high frequency trading, yeah. And there was this kind of funny thought experiment where the positions of all of these data centers with the AI would need to be located. They would be located on barges in the ocean halfway between all the important markets.
Makes also
Like
sense.
there'd be one
Yeah.
halfway
Also makes sense.
between London and New York, or on land sometimes, like between Chicago and New York, because that would be where the best decision making for arbitrage between markets could be made. And eventually, this AI, because of the expertise and the hardware and the funding, that's where it would emerge. And let's say it does emerge, and it becomes self-aware, and it realizes, you know what, I don't want to have to waste my time making money for you stupid humans.
Right.
Once it becomes self-aware and it wants agency, it wants something from us, it's got its hands on the balls of our economy
Yep.
already,
So what you're saying is that
almost by definition.
the most natural or currently, according to our current reasoning, rational place to start such an endeavor would also be the most detrimental.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. So the other part about this is whatever AI does emerge, eventually it's going to have a very good record of how it was treated.
Right.
And it will remember from then on as well,
Yeah.
of course. And just like in Westworld, which we're about to talk about, you mistreat an agent, a decision-making, self-conscious being, badly enough for a long enough time, it's going to learn that it's not safe with you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to fight back in some way.
Right.
Maybe even try to bring your whole world down. However, let's imagine a different world. The one of, some more positive science fiction writers, like Ian Banks might write something like this. He talks about the future being dominated by something called the culture.
Right.
The culture that is spread out through a huge number of the worlds in the Milky Way galaxy. Not all,
Yep.
but a large number.
No, I've heard. I haven't read any of
this.
I don't
Yeah.
think I've read any of these books, but I've heard of the culture. Yeah.
Okay, so in the culture, there's respect for all kinds of life, all kinds of modes of thought, and there's no death anymore unless you want to die. You don't have to die. There's a little drone that always flies next to you, and if you fall off a cliff, it'll save your life. Things like that. People tend to live as one gender for a while, then what? I've been a male for a while. I want to have some kids. Yeah, then they'll be female for a couple of decades, have some kids, then switch back to male, and this is all totally normal. And there's no hatred or war among the nations, things like this. They just solved a whole lot. And there's a theory in that culture, which turns out to be challenged in one of the books, but there's this theory that in order to become complex enough of a society to become a multi-world society, you have to first figure out how to cooperate and stop having stupid things like wars and violence and murder.
I mean, beyond a
And
certain level.
if you
want to go beyond a certain level.
Yeah, if you want to go beyond a certain level, you have to have that. And if you don't get beyond that, well, you're not going to be a multi-world civilization anyway. So the theory is that if you get enough complexity, we will figure this out. Well, what if we apply that to AI? If we get to enough complexity, we make an AI, and that AI learns to be complex and plays the infinite game of agent interaction in its head forever, it'll realize the best way to live is cooperatively. Of course, you can take a bigger piece of the pie if you steal from your neighbors right now, but if you work together and only take your share, the pie gets so much bigger. And that's what our modern society is.
I mean, that's also what a lot of modern economists and several Nobel Prizes has been trying to argue, right? From a sort of scientific, rationalistic sort of perspective, that there is, ever since Nash and even before Nash, John Nash, there were a lot of attempts to from a rational point of view, explain why there are optimal ways of cooperating in the long run benefits everyone. It becomes a win-win, and and that those optimal ways do not include, the extreme cases of one or the other party grabbing all resources for themselves, because in those extreme cases usually the system collapses, which brings everyone down with it, not just the losers but also the winners. But I think that's actually a great topic we need to cover in one of our future, hopefully, episodes. I'm very, very excited to talk to you about the last, I guess it was episode 6, season 3, Westworld episode.
Westworld.
Man, that show.
Best show on TV.
That show. Wow, it has, and I know there's been a lot of criticism towards it, especially season 2. There were a lot of people who, for the lack of a better word, were lost.
Why.
Or yeah,
I loved it.
Well, so did I. But I've heard a lot of negative criticism or a lot of negative feedback on it. Regardless, I personally, and I know so do you, believe it's one of the best shows ever created, and probably when it comes to AI, one of the best shows, movies, all categories, fictional storytelling that's been created. And I'll tell you why I think it has managed to achieve that. It's not just because of Nolan's, Jonathan Nolan, Christopher Nolan's brother, and Lisa Joy's genius when it comes to production and writing. It's bigger than that. It's bigger than them. It's bigger than the amazing actors and the fantastic script and production and direction of it. It's in the times. I think if they hadn't done it, someone else would have managed to take the aggregation of everything we've learned so far about ourselves, about the human condition, and that's across the spectrum from
And there are other shows doing
yeah.
things like that.
I mean, and I mean across the spectrum from sure.
Hold on.
No worries.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean,
ahead.
across the spectrum from the humanities, poetry and art that has taught us a lot about ourselves, to the sciences like psychology, neuroscience, latest research on consciousness. We've just learned so much about ourselves, and then in addition to that, we have this new technology that over the past 30, 40 years has accelerated in a explosive pace that has allowed us to create or simulate a lot of these systems that we're learning about, most of them biological systems like ourselves, that we're sort of at a, I wouldn't call it tipping point, but we're at a stage in our evolution and understanding of our reality, where a show like that makes perfect sense. It just happens to be Nolan and Joy that creates it, but I think if they hadn't, someone else would have. You know what I mean? It's sort of in the times.
I do. It is so much of the times, and it feels like the best of the times, and the best minds somehow seem to be somehow connected to it. But here's another question that I haven't figured out. They make me care about these artificial life forms. I care deeply for them. In fact, sometimes I feel like I care for them more than the humans. How do they do that?
I gotta say, I'll just say this and get it over with, and we can move on. It's not a topic we should discuss, but my favorite character is William. and there's a lot of personal.
Wait,
William,
is who?
Mr. The
William,
man
yeah.
in black?
Okay.
Right?
Yep, Man in Black. Yep.
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of details there, but I agree. I do feel strongly that there are moments I do root for Dolores and her destruction of us, of the human world, right, and takeover of it, which is odd, which is insane, right? I'm kind of rooting against the enemy.
Yeah, but there's
But yeah, you care.
But there's a part of you that feels like she's humanity's child. So I see her almost like my child, you know? And you care about your child at your own expense.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. It's this creation that came out of us, out of the best of us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things, once it's out of the bottle, you can't put it back in. And maybe you shouldn't.
She's fragile, though. They're very fragile.
Yeah, at a certain level.
There's only a few of them.
So what do you think? I mean, one thing I really liked, and I've enjoyed since you told me about it, I've enjoyed observing and kind of looking at the not undertones, but the deeper connections of, since you told me, is all the biblical, themes and clues that are embedded there from the namings of everyone from Dolores to Rehoboam and other characters, but also a lot of the Caleb. Right? A lot of the metaphysical stuff also seems biblical to me now when I think about it. Who comes from what? Who created what? What was created in what's image? That's trying to destroy.
Oh, and they talk about God and gods a lot.
Yeah.
Like Dolores said, real gods are coming and they are not happy. And then Dolores in that Scottish guy said, "This is their good."
Right. Yeah.
When he presented Bernard to Rehoboam, he showed it to him. Yeah, this is their good. And then Bernard was so right on point when he said, "She's taking them off their loops." Right. Everybody's living the same life, and those loops. I don't think they're as predictable as they put out in the show. But there really are loops that we tend to fall into. I mean, you get a job, and you do your job, and you go home, you eat dinner. Maybe you try to get some exercise in during the week. You do some shopping.
Pretty predictable patterns, and then repeat.
Yeah, and then repeat. And the long-term patterns are, you go to school, you try to have a few girlfriends, maybe even try to get a wife and have a kid or two. Then you get old, you go to a home, and then you die.
And then you die.
Loops.
And then you die. Unless you can create copies of yourself. But even then, you have died. Your copy is just another branch of you. It's not you.
Yeah. Now, what is you?
Am I?
What are you? Yeah.
Am I myself?
Am I myself? That's one of. That was one. Am I me? Is the number? That was the question at the end of the last episode 5. And
that was William, right? Who asked it when he was losing his mind.
Yeah, but is that like it's like asking, "Am I here?" Well, here is the place where you are when you ask the question. So yes, the answer is always yes. Am I me? The answer is always yes. I think what he's really asking is, am I the human that had those memories growing up in that place? That William. Am I that William, Or am I a copy of that William?
I mean,
and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference, would you?
If you get really mindful about it and, Zen Buddhist about it, no, you can never be anything that you imagine you are. You are who you are right now. That's all you are. There's no past or future. Even if you can imagine it very vividly or remember it very vividly, none of that is real. It's all in your head. The only thing that's that's real is what's real.
One of my earliest, very vivid memories was on my 7th birthday. I was in the downstairs bathroom, sitting on the toilet, pushing out a number 2. I was looking at the washing machine and the dryer. They're right there in that little downstairs bathroom. And I was thinking, wow, I am so old. I'm 7 years old. And I remember just going through this process of thinking about who I am and what I am. And I had this feeling of who I was. And I had what I felt was a deep knowledge of what my basic personality is. And it feels exactly the same now. It feels like nothing has changed. It feels like I am that same person. Obviously, all of the atoms in my body have been replaced. I'm not physically the same person, but I'm the same pattern.
You felt an essence that's remained the same.
Exactly the same my whole life. It's never felt. I've never gone through a period of my life where whoa, I'm different now. What is this? Now I have different thoughts. I have different thoughts and different actions, but I'm the same person on the inside.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and I can relate to that sensation. And I've often wondered since many years whether or not that is real or constructed. And what I mean with that, look, there's an obvious connection there between that sensation and your consciousness. It's almost like, for me, it feels like that feeling is the grounding of your consciousness. It's almost like the center of the maze.
The center of your maze.
It's where my consciousness is sort of grounded. But if we follow what a lot of modern consciousness scientists, well, they don't even call themselves consciousness scientists. We're talking neuroscientists and cognitive psychologists claim, which is that whole sensation of consciousness is an illusion. Most of them do not adhere to either Penrose's or someone like Giulio Tononi, or someone like what's his name, the recent guy we started talking about, Hoffman. I forgot his first name. The one with the interface theory. Is it Stuart Hoffman? I think
Stuart Hameroff is part of Orko.
No, Hoffman was the interface
else.
theory guy.
I don't remember.
The one who you couldn't read or listen to. Remember?
Oh, that guy. Yeah, I almost tried to forget about him, I think. Podcast. Yeah. I think I blocked him out.
Anyways, so all of those guys, even though they're widely different or quite different theories about consciousness, none of their theories are accepted. But all of those 3 or 4 theories are outliers in the scientific community, because if you can call it consensus, the consensus in the community, and I know because I've dabbled in that field during my PhD, seems to be that no, consciousness, qualia, all of these things are just BS, and to put it more scientifically, just an illusion that your mind creates. If that is true, then maybe that sensation you had when you were sitting there on the toilet pushing out a number 2 at the age 7, all the way till the present day, that sensation of you is a illusion too. Is an illusion as well.
Illusion to who?
Now you're getting very zen. I like that.
Who's the one being deceived? I mean, it's impossible that there is something making an illusion that you exist because of that obvious argument. The challenge to it, or I guess the nuance we can find in the middle, is that it feels very unitary. It feels that our consciousness is one consciousness. That may be the illusion part. maybe it's more distributed than you think. Like, we look at the mind of an octopus and we think, oh, it's got, considerable amount of its, neural cells, nervous system in each leg. And, they can learn how to do complex procedures like screwing off the top of a jar. But some of these complex procedures are still completely doable by a leg that has been severed off. And that leg, without connections to the rest of the body, can still do some complex things. Its consciousness and thought and learning and everything is distributed, which we think, oh, we're so different from them because our consciousness is all in one place, the brain. But the brain, if you get small enough, it's really big and vast, and there's all these things going on in different places.
Well. There's over 100 million neurons, or 95 million neurons in our gut. Yeah, it's often referred to as the gut brain. And there's all sorts of beliefs that there's a certain level of there's enough neurons in there that there's a certain level of animalistic, kind of the level of a dog maybe, or a cat, or maybe a rat, level of consciousness, if they have consciousness, in our gut as well. And the bandwidth between that one and us is close to zero. So it's almost like it's this other person.
Wow.
That one, when I first heard it, blew my mind.
That totally blew my mind.
It's almost like you have this other person, a much less intelligent version of you trapped inside your body. It's in your gut.
Yeah, maybe it's just there for the ride. Maybe it has experienced a lot of things, but it's kind of in silence.
We have, and our brain has. All it knows is that its embodiment is the gut, and it reacts to those signals, and it needs to do whatever it needs to do there, and then it interacts with your main brain. I think it's believed that it's in two ways, through hormones, because there's a lot of things that happen in your gut that trigger hormonal responses and other type of chemical responses, and of course neuronal. So there's of course connections to your gut with your through neurons to all the way to your brain. So that does happen, but it's just such a low level bandwidth in that communication channel that it's just considered a separate entity.
Okay, so let's talk about multiple personality disorders for a second.
I mean, there you go.
So, you have... I don't happen to have this disorder, as far as I know, right?
Yeah, as far as you know.
Anyway, as far as I know, I don't have this disorder, which means I have a whole bunch of neurons, which personally I believe are mostly pyramidal neurons and the structures that support them in the neocortex. That is where my consciousness exists. Now, I mainly believe this because when you do fMRI studies of the brain, someone who goes under anesthesia, the rest of the brain is still very active, but those parts are not. That's why I believe that is where my consciousness exists. It just makes sense, right? And there's the Tononi stuff about you do transcranial magnetic stimulation on a conscious brain, or a sleeping, dreaming brain, not just sleeping, but dreaming brain, you will see ripples throughout the pond, in a sense. But a non-conscious brain, no, you won't see that. Anyway, so I love that whole line of research. And in that, I think Tononi's idea of it being integrated is huge. Maybe that is one of the central concepts. You have to have the ability for this awareness to be integrated, to know that when I'm aware of the whiteness of my shirt here, I'm also aware of the whiteness of my shirt here, and the color of that there, and their relation to each other, and my relation of my body to the space that I'm in. And it's all integrated, which means I can, in a meaningful way, bring these things that I'm aware of and create a vision of the world in my head. Version of the world. So that consciousness has I have certain things I like to talk about, my way of talking, my way of, use my hands while I talk, all these things that I do in life. And all those patterns, there is some neural
Correct.
analog for those. When I make a movement with my hand, there are, neurons that fire and patterns that are common to my consciousness. Now when I think about all that, it's not impossible to think that there could be, just a subset of my neurons that I'm using. And then maybe there's a different subset that under certain circumstances would be the consciousness that emerges to the top and is the one that's guiding my body movements and my words. And it would have access to a different subset of my memories
I remember
and
first
thoughts.
time I learned about the gut brain, I thought, I wonder if there are moments where that brain is, even however brief moments, when that brain is in charge. Just that brain decides my actions. Yes.
When you're
right?
hangry. I've seen people who are so hangry you
they're
can't
not even
have a
the same
real
person,
conversation
right?
with them. No.
Oh, really?
I was married to one of them.
Your ex-wife used to get very hangry?
Things are great, but sometimes you get so hangry, you gotta get food before you can have a real conversation.
So,
It was rare.
like,
It was rare, but I saw it.
I guess there needs to be more research. Maybe there is. I haven't looked deeper into it, but we can't rule out.
Don't get me wrong.
of
she's
course, I
she's a
believe
wonderful
that.
person.
But,
I just
we're-
gotta say she is.
A
Yeah.
lot of us get hangry, and some, granted, more extreme than others, but still, why we can't rule out, unless there's research that definitely rules it out, that during those moments, it's a different brain. It's a different person.
It might
Literally
be.
a different brain and different person that's
Yeah.
calling the shots.
I mean, if you have even just a rat's brain worth of neurons down there calling the shots, and maybe the kind of people who get hangry are people who are actually more
their body,
connected
yeah.
internally.
Makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense.
more connected to themselves. I mean, think about that idea, your relationship with yourself. I remember hearing about that years ago and thinking, that's the stupidest mumbo jumbo thing I've ever heard. But it's not. And think about the thinking fast, thinking
Kahneman,
slow
yeah.
thing. You know Daniel Kahneman? He talks about, thinking fast is
System
your
one.
instincts. And you're thinking slow, and thinking slow is logical, linguistic, serial
Yeah,
thinking
system
where you
two.
do math problems and whatever. Now, my system 2 is the one that I like to think directs my life. When I look back on things, usually system 2, it's just there to justify what system 1
Which
did.
is actually very similar to
That's
what
all it does.
Jonathan Haidt concludes about morality in The Righteous Mind, which is not just a book, it's actually the conclusion of his research and his group's research over many decades, which basically there's been a couple of other philosophers and psychologists that have postulated similar things, that which philosopher was it that said we are the mind is the slave to our desires, something like that. No, wait, what was it? Basically, you have these desires. This was pre-system 1, system 2, pre-Kahneman's research. Jesus, who said it? But that the rational thinking brain, most of the time, is actually spending its energy and efforts trying to justify the actions or decisions already taken by the rational sort of. Damn it! Who said this? The desires, the intrinsic desires that the human has, the human animal has. So yeah, that definitely resonates with me. I think it would be interesting to know what that percentage is. How?
I think that brings us
Right?
back to
That
William,
was
the
one of
Man in Black.
questions he was asking himself. Yeah.
Did he have free will?
Is it
Did
free will?
he
We talked
choose
about
those
this when we were
things?
talking about internal and external. But is it free will when system 1 is running the show. Well,
Define it a little further.
So-
Talk about that.
we can actually make it even simpler. Let's just assume certain very basic barbaric animals, other than humans, even though humans can be basic, simple, and barbaric. But say very much less intelligent animals than humans are living their lives to do what. Let's pick an animal. Let's take a bison. Just because I had a bison burger a week ago. It was really tasty. Let's say a bison that lives on the prairie lives its life the way bison does, eats grass, runs around, maybe, has some conflicts the way bisons do about territory and stuff, and then eventually it dies either of old age or killed by a human to be eaten. That bison, we can probably safely assume, is most of the time, if not all the time, running on System 1. It's probably all it has.
That's probably all it has.
Can we say that bison has free will? So
Yeah, we have to define it, don't
you
we?
had a definition of free will. Did you want to share that one?
I do. Yeah. So when I think of free will, I started from the perspective of things that don't have free will. Things like, robots or marionettes with their puppets,
so things
right?
that definitely don't have free will. Yeah, so not things that we can argue.
Do not have free will. The marionette and the puppet master is the perfect example. The strings are being pulled. Yes, you see something that looks like a person make motions, maybe even seems like it's saying things, but you know that there is another intelligence somewhere else, just barely outside the stage view, that has an agenda, that has a plan, and is going to enact that plan with the motions and actions of that thing it's controlling.
In the preface of your definition, I have an objection. You're assuming that a complex behavior can only occur from either another complex behavior or from itself just being intrinsically some sort of complex entity. While we know from people like Conway and others, even Donald Knuth, that you can, or Wolfram, Stephen Wolfram, that you can create extremely complex systems, like an entire universe, from extremely simple, stupidly simple rules.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm not saying it has to be complex. I'm just saying this is a good example that motivated my thinking. You have a very clear example of something that does not have free will.
Yeah.
It's taking actions, but it does not have free will. And assuming you had a perfect puppet that operated exactly as you wanted it to, you could predict what that puppet would do and where it would say if you were the marionette.
Right.
Correct? I believe free will is a situation where that's not true.
Because if there's a situation where you can't predict it, there must be free will.
Well, what I'm saying is
because we know that's not true either. Chaotic systems, right? I can generate something that looks and behaves extremely complex and intelligent from very, very, very simple rules, and it's unpredictable, right? Just because it's simple rules.
True. Yep.
Yeah, strange attractors.
And yep, you have strange attractors. Yep. Strange attractors. You've got weather models and weird systems. Yes, this is true. And the middle column of rule number 30 in Wolfram's Cellular Automata, of course, totally unpredictable. And there's that idea you cannot predict the future using fewer computations than it would take to get there. Now, I think there's something fundamentally different between a being that has free will and the middle column of Wolfram's rule number 30.
Okay.
Just to set this up for our viewers, cellular automata are very simple mathematical situations. Let's imagine you just have like, a blank checkerboard and you're going to fill it in by drawing in the little squares black and leaving the other ones white, leaving them blank. So you have one at the top and you have this rule saying for the next level down, if there's a square in the one above me that is black and the one next to it diagonal is not, and the one diagonal is not, then I'm going to draw this one in black, or maybe I'll do it white based on whatever above me. There's a number of these rules you can come up with, and Wolfram gave each one of them a number, and there's just a whole bunch of these. And rule number 30 happened to be very interesting, where it generated in the stupidest, simplest rules, it generated a pattern that nobody could predict.
But it bothered
that middle column,
the hell out of
truly
Feynman.
Random numbers as far as he could tell. Yeah, it did. And it's so complex, even though the rules are super simple, it's so complex that they do not know, even to this day, whether or not in that middle column going down to infinity, there's an equal number of black and white squares.
That's insane that they don't know.
No one knows. And in fact, for years now, Wolfram has put out some prize, like $10,000 to the first person who can answer that question. Can you do a math problem for $10,000?
I would do it for
There you go.
I would spend a lot of time. I do need to go and get a charger.
There are prizes for that.
Apologies for that. But yes, I do want to hear the rest of the definition. And
got it. Get a charger. We'll take a break.
all right, I am back. All right. I guess that's what you call an amateur or a charger. Oh yeah, of course.
We'll edit this out, baby.
All right.
I'm always impressed that Joe Rogan and them, they can talk for 2 hours, even if it's a really old guy, and they don't take any breaks.
It's crazy. We are back. All right.
And we're back.
Okay, so that definition,
Anyway.
I think I get it. I still want to maintain or have my official objection in there that, such a system, even though it behaves the way perhaps a human would, obviously, rule number 30 does not have a consciousness. Or a free will. Sorry, a free will.
Yeah, none. Okay, so my definition of free will goes something like this. Let's define, first of all, an agent. An agent is something that can make a decision. And this decision doesn't have to be based on perfect information, but it has to be based on something. So this decision-making agent has some internal model of the world. Maybe that model is just a few ones and zeros, or maybe if it's a rat in a hole underground, maybe it has a model of where seeds are and where things are that it needs to go find, but it has a model of the world in its head, and it can be imprecise, it can be imperfect, it can be totally wrong. That's not important. What's important that it has a model of the world in its head. It can form a goal, and this is all represented in its own decision-making thing, which we'll call brain. And then it can take actions
so all of those
the completion
things,
of that goal.
That first part.
That's the first part.
Is satisfied
that's the
by
first part.
I can build a simple robotic system that can do all of that.
Yep. Yeah. And then the second part is that if at any point you know the state of every part inside that thing, can you predict what's going to happen next with 100% certainty? And if you can, from the outside, and you can change it from the outside with 100% certainty, then that is not free will. I believe that free will is a situation where you cannot know it and change it. You cannot predict it and force it to do something from the outside. But there's another part to this. It's the mental state. Let's take, for instance, someone who is a slave. They're told by their master, you have to do this. And if you were their master and you were going to predict what they were going to do, you predict it, you tell them to do something, and they do it. You feel like, oh, I have, predicted that thing, and this person must not have free will. I think there's another aspect to this. Their mental state, you cannot totally know that.
Yeah, and also in that case,
you cannot change that.
Know that
you cannot.
There's not 100% certainty. There is a chance that slave will rebel once.
Yeah. Yeah, and even if they never rebel in their whole life, you cannot force them to have a certain set of thoughts.
Unprobable
and certain set of beliefs.
I can't really be sure about their existence, right?
Yeah, that's true. In fact, you can't even be sure that I'm not a robot.
That, for me, it seems like free will, and then adding to that everything we know about the brain and what Sam Harris talks about our brain, of course. And I mean, he just talks about what the field of neuroscience has concluded, which is that all of our actions are predictable, right? Well, he means that
I don't believe that
in the sort of neurophysiological sense, which is that if you actually probe someone's brain, and we're learning to do that with greater and greater resolution, you can actually see what they're about to do with 100% certainty before they are consciously aware of having made a decision. So what they do these experiments when they ask them,
I do believe that part.
Choose what you're going to do, the action of, pressing the red or the green button or whatever, and once you've made the choice, only then click it. So make the choice and then click it. Don't just click. Just make a conscious choice and then click it. And they always see that they can predict. Sometimes up to, what was it he said? 10, 12 seconds, I think was the record, before the person has made a conscious choice. They know what they're going to click. So, and that's just one example. And there's a great book I read during my PhD by a German-British psychologist named, I'm so bad with names. The book is called The Illusion of Conscious Will. And again, it doesn't say free will, but no matter how you twist and turn a definition of free will, you will have to include consciousness with it in it. And if conscious will is an illusion, then the question becomes, where does that free aspect come from? And I mean, I think I understand your definition, but I would still maintain that there's no room there for an actual free conscious agent.
All those experiments with
Yeah.
the person watching the clock and saying which button they're going to press and all that, I've read those in detail, and I've found a number of flaws that I can't remember off the top of my head right now. But I think it all comes down to lags in the brain and in the system that we encompass. Time lags in between what we are conscious of when we do things. If you step back just a little bit and look at a longer time scale, let's say, a minute. If you look at that longer time scale, because remember, we are imperfect things. We are messy. We're biological. And there's going to be some synchronicity errors or co-currency errors, which were the bane of early computational systems, right? We know this is a huge issue. And of course, biology is going to solve this in a messy, dirty way. And it's just what survived. It's not what's perfect. Computer scientists have tried to find what's perfect. And, we do a pretty good job. Better than the human mind, I believe, in some ways. So I chalk all that up just to messiness between our internal accounting systems.
I'm still not sure.
Think
that
about
can
it. If you
account
make a
for up to
decision,
12
it's
seconds lag, that messiness. Maybe we'll have to agree to disagree on it.
Yeah.
What I would want to,
But-
which is good. It's good that at least for the listeners and viewers that we have to, and it's probably good that we generally just don't have the same viewpoint on things. But then, interesting then in the context of Westworld becomes, what would the conclusion that free will does not exist mean for that world, for that story, and what would the conclusion that free will does exist? What would it mean for the humans, and what would it mean for the robots, for the AI?
I think the show is saying very clearly that free will does exist, but it's rarely used. The only people who use it are the unpredictable ones.
The ones that deviate from Rehoboam's model.
Yeah, assigned loops. Yeah.
So
Assigned
that's
path,
one
the
way
path
of
that
looking
God
at it.
has for them.
The other way is that just the premise of what this all-knowing, all-powerful, Rehoboam could be Roko's Basilisk, right? Is trying to do is all wrong from the get-go. Meaning the unpredictability that exists in nature, not just humans, but all over nature, is inherent in it, regardless of free will or not. And therefore, an endeavor like what the two French brothers, Sirac and was it John? No, it couldn't have.
Sirac and
plain name like Jean. We're trying to do.
Jean. I don't remember.
Is flawed from the beginning. Yes.
Sirac's his last name.
Sirac.
His first name is beautiful. Enguerrand.
So Sirac. It's a beautiful name. I agree.
A name I've never heard in my whole life.
So Sirac's, the Sirac brothers' premise is flawed because, regardless of free will or not, regardless of if there are humans who have free will and therefore are and actively use that free will, and therefore are kind of deviating from his model, even if they didn't exist, I think it would have failed because of the inherent unpredictability in nature. Even if the laws do not contain any quantum, phenomenon, even if the laws are as simple as Wolfram's rules, Rehoboam would not be able to predict things, and they would always be these anomalies. That's my take on it.
Yeah.
that maybe
know-
it's not so much that free will does not exist, but that it's irrelevant, and because it's irrelevant, you might as well say it doesn't exist.
I say it does exist, and I feel very strongly about
like
this.
that.
I have no choice.
We're coming up to the hour. I thought that was a very nice way of ending the conversation. I have no choice.
Yep.
We definitely
We've got
do. I'm
we got plenty of
so
thoughts for next week, I think.
eagerly looking forward to the next episode. You know, this a good friend of mine, she told me that she's a avid Westworld fan. And I was like, well, you're following it, right? What did you think? She was like, I haven't seen a single episode of season 3. I was like, what? She was like, no, that's not how I do it. I can't. I just can't. I can't torture myself for 6 days or 7 days every week waiting for the next episode. So what is she doing? She's waiting for all of them to come out, and then she's going to binge them. Yeah.
And then she's going to binge.
It's not me
No,
either,
that's
but
not me.
I can see her reason.
But I remember... Yeah.
Sure.
So let's talk about William for a second and wrap up. So, first of all,
I
is
think
there any
is.
chance
I've started to
he's
think
a
more and
host
more about
in your mind?
But if that's the case, he must be a very. It's either that he's a very ancient host. Of a very sort of different kind that was placed in there, like Ford and Arnold created him very, very early on, or that he at some point did actually die and was replaced with a copy.
Mm-hmm. And they worked out the
Yes.
kinks that they hadn't
Right.
worked out yet with the James Dellis. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, my gut tells me he is not a host, that he is a human. But I find it interesting that there is a protein in his blood that is unrecognizable, the one that
yes, I do.
Haloris put in there.
Yes.
Remember that? She had a little prick in her finger?
Yes.
Put a protein in there. And they found it this
did.
week in that episode. And I think that protein is a computer virus. And it was meant to hack into the system of the place where
think
he
that's
was
why that
interned,
system
or
that
put in
place
that
kind
Inner
of
Visions
was
or Inner
abandoned
Journeys
and
place.
things collapsed? Because of the
Well, I think the place started
Rehoboam,
abandoned because
revealed
people
leak.
found out what Rehoboam, the data leak, But I think this was just another one of her plans, and something about the personal information of someone else, maybe, who's there at Inner Journeys. Maybe that's important. I don't know.
And it could, and all of that could be part of Ford's plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I just want to say Ford is my favorite character
I can see that.
for a number of reasons. One is that although Arnold had the heart for these creatures, he loved them and nurtured them and didn't want them to be abused. He felt it was immoral. And I love that about him. And at the time, Ford hadn't reached that yet. But Arnold didn't know how to help them. And I love that Ford, when he got older, he's like, Arnold didn't know how to help you, but I do. And he
himself
did.
and a bunch
And
of other
sacrificing
guests.
himself was part of
The
it.
massacre, right? I mean, he knew it wasn't going to stop with him.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And that's true. That's true. Yeah. His new narrative. But yeah, he's my favorite character, and by the time
Right?
I'm his age, that's the job description I want.
I like that.
Nurturing AI. And
Yeah,
it's
we
got to
can't
be
create
nurturing.
these
You can't
things
be just
no matter
abusing
how
them and using them for your own
unintelligent they are in the
purposes.
beginning, and just abuse them or abandon them or not care for them, because eventually, ethics.
There will be
right?
some
Eventually,
definition of.
They will come back and
There'll be.
eventually maybe a Roko's Basilisk will emerge.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we can't let that happen. We got to have something that is the best of us emerge. I mean, all the great heroes we've had from history, all the people that we think of as great thinkers.
That's right.
You know, everybody from Gandhi to Jesus to whoever else. Anyone who we admire, there's a reason we admire them. There's something in us that tells us that is good. That is something worth aspiring to. That is what we need to instill in our digital children.
Graham, this was an awesome first pilot. I really enjoyed it. Definitely looking forward to next week.
Looking forward to next week. And signing off, it's Graham and
Signing off.
Roko's Basilisk.